नहीं तो मुझे ये problem. All right. Starting with the induction of labor, the definition of induction of labor is when a labor is one in which a pregnancy is terminated artificially at any time after 28 weeks of gestation by a method that aims to secure delivery via a natural method. There are different methods of doing it, indications for elective and planned delivery. It could be due to obstetrical reasons. Inductions can be done due to medical reasons, can be or cumulative factors. There are many factors which affect the need of delivery, and there are social indications as per patient's choice or as per doctor's choice. The obstetrical indications where we need to go for an induction is the preeclampsia, where we have to manage between the patients and the baby's. Uh, we have to see and manage to see whether the baby is fine or not, or we have to make a decision before we the patient gets any other complication. We need to deliver her. What is the time of induction? We don't know. That is always decided at the time, and it is very much individualized for every patient. In an eclamptic patient, if a patient comes with a fit, then we have to make an immediate decision of delivery because the patient will be managed only with the delivery. So again, it is a mandatory reason. Previously, large babies, if they are very good sized babies, in order to prevent the complications of large babies, that is shoulder dystocia, so we plan at an appropriate time when there is no prematurity, and we do not take it beyond the expected date of delivery. Then the post maturity, we plan if the patients do not go into labor after 41 weeks as well, then we have to deliver them. Intrauterine growth restrictions, which is IUGR, because any hypertensive patients or any other reason, if the baby is small enough, then also we have to induce before they go into term. Any mild disproportion, if you think that the patient has got unstable lie and once it is cephalic, then you might need to make a decision. For severe hydromenos, we also make a decision to deliver because there are chances of having an abruption. There have chances of having any abruption or excessive bleeding, so we decide to deliver the baby early. Then recurrent intrauterine fetal deaths, if a patient has got an early delivery, a history of IUD at 36 weeks, so we should not take the pregnancy beyond 36 weeks. It should be delivered before that. Any fetal abnormalities, anencephaly baby, we have to terminate them. Any other reason where the baby is hydrocephalus and the fetal head is growing too fast and we need a surgery for that baby, so we also plan to deliver that baby early. Then rhesus isoimmunization before the baby gets jaundiced. It is definitely a separate topic which will be discussed definitely later on in some other scenario. Here, if a patient has got isoimmunization, so we always plan to deliver them early where it is appropriate and baby is not very premature. Any intrauterine death, of course, with the death, we do not wait. We give them a week or 2 weeks time, and then we plan to deliver patients with jaundice and hyperemesis. In the medical conditions where there is a chronic nephritis, we only wait for the baby to reach to an appropriate gestational age, and once it is achieved, then we deliver that. High blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, or choreo gravidarum. Cumulative indicating elective delivery is not urgent, but there are many reasons because we have to deliver electively, the timings are there, the patient has to travel somewhere, or there are some issues in the hospital. Like for example, we have got corona now, and if the patient is coming with a mild labor, we're not going to leave them for a longer time. If a patient comes with a term pregnancy, we plan to deliver them appropriately because you cannot make them come and go to the hospital repeatedly. Social indications where the patient needs a convenience because they're traveling, their family is coming, they need a support, they can't. they can't manage their house, so they have to arrange something, and we have to go for a social induction of labor, or the doctor's convenience. For example, if you are not available and your patient wants a delivery by a particular doctor, or the doctor is busy with some conferences and they cannot leave their conference in between, so they have to deliver the patient. So also that is an indication where we call it as a social indication. uh, we close. Actually, uh, then what are the contraindications to induction? Where it is a CPD, when you know there is a disproportion in the pelvis, that is cephalopelvic disproportion, for example, in a patient with a polio, those who have got abnormal pelvis, or they have got any previous accident, or there is any abnormality of the pelvic pelvis. So there you make a decision earlier. You do not take them to the term. You make a decision and induce the baby before 34 weeks, except in eclampsia. Whether in the patients, if the lie is longitudinal, okay, other than longitudinal lie, then you do not induce a baby. With the CPD, you do not induce a patient. With before 34 weeks, you do not induce a patient because the baby is too small for that. Um, Longitudinal lie is only allowed for a normal vaginal delivery. Otherwise, you go for an elective cesarean section. Previous failed trial of labor. Again, if you have given a fair trial to the patient and the patient is not delivered vaginally, so there is no point in giving them an induction. If there is a tumor in the lower segment of the uterus, for example, a fibroid in the lower segment, then also we do not induce. Known patients, cardiac patients, where they cannot bear the trauma of that delivery and the second stage of labor, they cannot do a push. So there also we plan for an elective cesarean section. We cannot go for an induction. Elderly primary gravida is a relative contraindication. It depends that you have to make a decision, but it is not an absolute contraindication. What are the different methods of induction of labor? It's an amniotomy where we rupture the bag of the amniotic bag, and the other is the syntocinon. There are other methods as well, but we are going to discuss about amniotomy, syntocinon, and once it is finished, then we will talk about the other methods as well. What are the factors which affect the decision of our outcome? It is the pre-labor uterine contractions, the Bishop score. Bishop score is very important. If the patient has a good Bishop, yes, we can induce and choose the method of induction. Fetal maturity is extremely important. We try not to induce any patients electively before 37 weeks of gestation until and unless there is an emergency or a medical emergency. Maternal age, two young patients and very elderly, they both are the patients where we have to make a decision for for the induction. According to the parity, we decide that which method is to be used and whether we have to use prostaglandin or we have to only go for amniotomy or syntocinon. Occipito-posterior position, because these patients sometimes deliver and for sometimes is a very prolonged labor and it is very difficult. So again, you have to weigh and balance your decision. Then the level of the presenting part. Very high head, free floating. Usually they should not be given induction because there are higher chances of having a cord prolapse. What are the risk of induction? If we are inducing and we have not made a proper assessment, then it is the prematurity which is there, and we can have a problem with the prematurity. Uh, so make sure that whenever you induce, the baby is mature enough to not to go into the NICU. Then again, you have to tell the patient that there is a possibility of failed induction, higher chances of infection because we are intervening, we are putting either a Foley's catheter or putting a tablet into the vagina or a gel into the cervix. Then if on a high head or if in a non-laboring patient, if you do an induction by amniotomy, then there are chances of having a cord prolapse. Neonatal jaundice is seen more in these patients. fetal distress because you can have excessive syntocinon or uncontrolled syntocinon that also can cause a fetal distress. Hypertonus means if the syntocinon is being inserted and you do not monitor the drops for the syntocinon, and the patient can go into hyperstimulation, and hyperstimulation again is a risk factor. And because of this hyperstimulation, it can lead to ruptured uterus if it is not being taken into notice. Then water retention also, because of excessive of syntocinon and a prolonged labor, induction takes a longer time than a natural delivery. There are high chances of instrumental delivery because whenever you induce, it is being seen that patient have already exhausted and they do not want to push. So there are higher chances. Again, the rate of LSCS is higher whenever you differ from a natural process. Unforeseen disproportion, for example, the baby is fine, the pelvis is fine, baby is not a good size, but after your induction, the entry of the head is not proper into the pelvis, then again, it can end up into a cesarean section. So induction has got that risk as well. Secondary uterine inertia, it went into, means the labor started, the uterus was contracting, but at some time it went into a rest and the further progress did not happen. Placental site retraction, abruptio placentae, partial blood stained liquor, these are all the complications or the risk factors that can happen. Dry labor, because of once we do an amniotomy, the fluid is drained, and because of that, the fetus lives into, for further many hours, lives into the uterus without the liquor, so they can have a fetal pneumonia. Then amniotic fluid embolism is not very common, but yes, it is a known complication and a very fatal complication, and higher fetal mortality as compared to the others. Subsequent management in induction is amniotomy. And if you do an amniotomy, which is followed by oxytocin infusion, the active policy of management of induced labor, uh, the monitoring of the uterine cavity by means, it has to be done by a topograph, CTG, that is called cardiotocograph, where we put two probes on the mother's uterus, on the abdomen. One it is on the fundus, which is a topograph, and one it is on assessing the fetal hearts, and then we put it there, which is called the cardiograph. Topograph is the it's a probe which monitors the uterine contractions. Uh, in order to prevent the hypertonus, we have to reduce the dose of syntocinon, or accordingly, if it is hypotonus, then we have to increase the dose of syntocinon. Uh, Induction of labor, it also reduces induction delivery interval. If we give the patient an oxytocin, the timing for the delivery is reduced, because only amniotomy will not help that much. And patients, because when they have discoordinated uterine contractions, then we have to start with oxytocin. So definitely it will reduce the time and delivery interval. Controlled and monitored methods are used. It can be used to initiate also labor in patients, those who are already have a good Bishop score. It means that they come after a Bishop score of 6 or more. You do not need to do an amniotomy. They can only, or a patient comes with ruptured membranes, then you only need an augmentation, and then augmentation means already in labor, just have to give a a go ahead, and the patient delivers with this little augmentation. How do we use it? The syntocinon is basically decided according to the parity and according to the parity and the uterine contractions. Usually we start with 5 units of syntocinon and 500 ml of dextrose water. The initial rate is, we start with 10 drops per minute, and after every half an hour, the 10 drops are increased up maximum up to 60 drops. We do not take it beyond 60 drops. The purpose is just to titrate up to high doses to achieve an adequate response where we get a good uterine contractions. that is adequate uterine contractions. And in the definition of adequate uterine contractions, these are the contractions which are up to 40 seconds, 40 to 45 seconds. If it is mild, then definitely we have to increase the dose. But if at a particular number of units we find the dose has, for example, the drops has reached up to 40 units, 40 drops, 5 units intusinon in 500 ml, and the drops are up to 40 drops. But please, okay, and it is up till for example 40 drops, and then now the patient is contracting adequately, that is the contractions are up to 40-45 seconds, then we do not increase the number of drops, we stop at that time, and we keep on monitoring the infusion from there onwards, and we do not change the number of drops. Amniotomy plus oxygen titration. Amniotomy means the artificial rupture of 4 waters, and that drains the liquor. It also helps in seeing the type of the meconium. Meconium means color of the amniotic fluid. Because if the patient is in labor, the color of the amniotic fluid can change from stage 1, grade 1 meconium to grade 3 meconium, and that is the darker the meconium becomes, it is bad for the baby. So once we do an amniotomy of the 4 waters, then we also assess uh, the the grading of the meconium. Also, to apply scalp electrodes to see the fetal pH. It is not available in our country. We don't do that. But yes, internationally it is available, and amniotomy is also done to assess the fetal distress. There are other methods, and out of all these are not available in Pakistan, like buccal pitocin. Pitocin is again an oxytocin. The buccal pitocin is not available, but yes, internationally it is. Nasal pitocin sprays are not available here, but sweeping and stretching of the membranes is something that we do it manually. So yes, we do this. Foley's catheter is placed in the cervix. This is another method of induction, and usually we do it in those patients where we have got a very bad bishop, means poor bishop. For example, the bishop score between 1 to 3. So there is no point in putting a prostaglandin straight away. Initially, we put a Foley's catheter, and once the Foley's catheter is placed, it usually causes a pressure on the cervix, which dilates the cervix. And then later on, after 6 hours, this Foley's is removed from the cervix, and then the prostaglandins are placed. The prostaglandins that we use is prostaglandin E2, F2 alpha, and Prepidol gel. There is another prostaglandin E1 which is used, but E1 is not FDA approved for full-term delivery, so therefore it is not given here. But yes, E1 is misoprostol with the name of misoprostol, but for the termination of pregnancies in less than 20 weeks, it is used. But then again, not given here for the term pregnancies because it has not been approved by FDA. The routes where these can be used prostaglandins, they are oral, misoprostol is used oral, alpha, F2 alpha is used intravenous, extraamniotic infusion can be done. PGE2 alpha is tilosogel. Here we have got with the name of prostaglandin or glandin, there are different names. Then vaginal pessaries, and E2 Prepidol gel was also available, but now it is not in the market. The dose of the oral prostaglandin is 0.5 milligram with the initial dose, and then it can be increased to 1 milligram after an hour, and the subsequent dose is maximum of 2 milligram at 2-hourly interval depending upon the response. Usually this type of regime is taken for the lesser for the patients where you have got a very uh, early gestation, that is 24-25 weeks, but in a term pregnancy we use it after every 4-hourly. And 0.5 milligram gel is administered intracervically, and then which is repeated after 6 to 8 hours. These are the prostaglandins which have been already told before. The routes are oral tablets, vaginal pessaries, IV infusion, and same induction of labor with this. With the IV prostaglandin, E2 is zero point 0.5 gram to 2.5 grams. F2 alpha, then you start from 5 micrograms to 25 microgram per minute. Infusion pumps should be used for these two, for the IV ones, because you have to monitor the dose. But usually it is not, because it is not available in Pakistan, so we are not used to this. It has got severe side effects, which are nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, and local inflammatory lesions along the infusion veins, and it has got a discomfort in the arm. IV prostaglandins, these are advantages that it is easy, patient does not feel any inconvenience that we have to put it into the vagina, but the disadvantage of having an IV prostaglandin is the rates cannot be controlled. It is not very precise, and the GI symptoms are very bad. I mean, we have to sometimes discontinue because of the GI symptoms, which are common with the IV one. Only used when the cervix is ripe, and mainly effective in multiparas. It has to be used at a lesser rate. And intravaginal methods may you use zero point 0.5 milligram to 2 milligram administered, which is every 2 hours within an induction delivery interval of 8 hours. If it is uh, advanced gestational age, that is more than 37 weeks, then we place it after every 4 hours or 6 hours. If it is a prostaglandin E2, because that has got a higher power, that is more than 2 milligram, so we give it after every 6 hours. But if it is a misoprostol, which is placed intravaginally, and the gestational age is advanced, then we hardly use up to zero point 0.5 milligram. Uh, but if it is a smaller uterus, then we have to use repeatedly, which can be done after every 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. There are different regimes which is being given by the RCOG.